Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. We'll wait for 2-3 minutes. Good evening. Good evening. I think it is Ankit. You email me, I'll send it forward. Good evening. Abhishek, what ma'am are you referring to? Sir, why it happens when ma'am takes analysis? I don't get many things. Maybe we are not used to ma'am. Which ma'am? What context are you asking? Yes, Himanshu. All world history with me only. Morning, evening, weekend, anything. Yes, the one which is coming on 18 September is me only. We'll wait for 1 more minute, 1 to 2 minutes. So you're talking about CNA, Pallavi ma'am. That is on ma'am. I don't know why when she teaches you don't get it and I teach or someone else teaches. Totally her thing. So because what she was taking CNA today, I have no idea who took it today. One more minute we wait and we begin. Okay. So part C for this weekend. This is the last section. When will you take world history? I think world history batch comes on 18 September. World history evening. I think. Okay. So the agenda for what is left today, these 2.5 hours, is to understand three things: land grants, plus Gupta polity and period. Also understand the concept of Bhagavatism and Hinduism. Weekend batch world history, Ankit, you would have to see what is the schedule. I am not sure when it comes in world. When world comes in weekend. As of right now, I know what is happening right weekend and evening, which is 18 September evening. Okay. Now, most probably after this only, this will go until 24th of September. So after 24th only. What we have to discuss is a very dangerous tendency which the Satvahana started, and it became a very, very problematic aspect of ancient India, and thereafter it led to what we call as early medieval tendencies to develop in India itself. Now we know Satvahanas are Brahmins, and when the Satvahanas do come to rise, the most popular religion at that point of time in the rulers would be Buddhism. So in order to what we call as concept of revivalism of Vedic Brahmanism, the Satvahanas started to give Brahmins one thing which became a dangerous tendency in the Indian subcontinent, and that is called tax free land grant. Tax free land grant. Why is that tax free land grants are so dangerous? Because very simply, when a ruler gives a Brahmin a tax free land grant, what the ruler is doing is he is foregoing the tax the state collects. The Brahmin has full control over every aspect of that land. So what basically the Satvahanas do, which is a process of appeasement of Brahmins, they actually are creating local power centers. Because what the Satvahanas do is that they do it only for initially appeasement of Brahmins. But once the state revenue falls, once Roman trade declines, there's a fall in the taxes from trade, and what the rulers do is that they start to give tax-free land grants to officers in lieu of salary. And what they basically produce, which has historically been called as Maharathis and Mahabhojas. Maharathis and Mahabhojas are very simply the concept of local power intermediaries. Satvahanas introduced into the Indian subcontinent what we call as feudalistic tendencies or decentralized administrative structures, all because of one thing, which is a land grant. Once the land grant tradition starts in India, feudalistic tendencies were bound to develop, because with every land grant given, every land grant which would have multiple villages, the ruler is firstly draining the treasury, and over and above that, this area is now like a local power center. And whilst the Satavahanas did not do, or rather did not give too many service related land grants, they did give it to Brahmins itself. Brahmins transformed from being a class which knew knowledge or had control over knowledge and rituals to a landed elite. And if a Brahmin has been given 10 to 100 villages, very simply that Brahmin becomes the master of that area. And if that may be true for an officer, it is equally dangerous, because then that officer acts like a local power center, which is in itself also a problem. So what the Satavahanas did was that they introduced a tendency which will fragment the Indian subcontinent, and decentralization tendencies are going to become common throughout the subcontinent generally. And after the post-Mauryan period, all polities will be decentralized, which is one of the most important features of a early medieval or medieval type polity. So we are now transitioning away from pure ancient into early medieval by this discussion. Are you able to understand why land grants are important? I'll write it in one slide itself, but why a thing which was started by the Satavahanas will very simply become poison in the political landscape of India generally. There's no connections. I mean, again, Vivek, that is a irrelevant question. The Brahmin led to establishment zamindari politics. Zamindars still exist. Landlords always exist. I'm talking about a person who exists over and above all zamindars. A person who owns everything. Basically, the de facto power center. So this is not, you're mixing up two things very clearly. Simple point is Satavahanas, Brahmins, tax-free land grant. Something starts like that and becomes a tendency much bigger than what it was. Are we clear with regards to it? Then I put it on one slide as a form of a summary, and then we can talk about the Guptas. Parallel power center, yes. Yes, no, I have to say something. Okay. The idea of tax-free land grants is based on the concept of appeasement. You give dan or dakshina to a Brahmin, you are going to give him a village. That is the grandeur of a king. They want to give it because as of right now, there's no issue of polity or economy. And therefore, they're giving them to appease Brahmins, that I am such a good ruler that I am going to give the land to a Brahmin itself. More than that, the problem is that because Satavahanas are Brahmins themselves, they have a pro-Brahmin or a what we call as revivalistic understanding. So they very quickly started to give more and more grants. And the more grants they give, the more problems they're creating for themselves in the long run. So let me bring this together in one slide. See, this is a land grant. These are called copper plate land grants. It has a royal seal which tells you that it is authentic, and mostly they're written in Sanskrit or in Tamil. This is given to a person. It mentions where the land is, what is of the ownership of that person, and it is tax free. So when we talk about Satvahana administration, Satvahanas did divide their empire into ahars. Ahars is basically provinces, but the point is they have different type of officers also. But they started the practice of granting tax-free land grants or villages to Brahmins and Buddhist monks. And that in turn is the way in which Maharathis and Mahabhojas, local power centers, which were already there, but also will become strengthened because of Satvahanas, because Satvahanas will create a context in which these Maharathis and Mahabhojas will get further strengthened by tax-free land grant in lieu of service. You did some service to me, I don't have money, so rather than giving you money, I will rather give you land itself. Because land is abandoned at this point of time, nobody really cares. So let me put it into one place. See, Satavahanas, appeasement of Brahmins, grant tax free land grant. Creates the tendency that if no money or capital to pay officers, land grant, it is an act of grandeur but becomes a dangerous precedence. Land grant in lieu of salary. And the problem is that the state loses taxes and revenue, creates local power intermediaries, strengthens and creates local power intermediaries. Local power intermediaries. And very simply, if we add these two and add these two, this is a recipe for fragmentation of polity, which we call as feudalistic tendency. Feudalism never existed in India. Feudalism is the concept of this king, knight, landlord, serf, bonded labor concept never came through. We call it feudalistic tendency for a very simple reason, because feudalism is a decentralized network or decentralized system of power. So we basically mean it in the context of decentralization. Decentralization. A very simple example of this process could be that, for example, if third point, what, land grant in lieu of salary, which is that I am an officer in your administration, I basically am, I have to be given 10,000 gold coins as my salary, but because the trade of the economy or the Roman trade has declined, I don't have gold coins. So I will rather give a village whose tax is equivalent to 10,000 gold coins. Now, this becomes land grant in lieu of salary. But by giving that, you also give me absolute power. As I was saying, a very simple example of this would be that you are the DM of Agra, for example. And when you're DM of Agra, this creates a tendency, yes. Tendency in the sense that the kings now have an option. Before the Satavahanas introduced this, no king never gave tax-free land grants. Creates the tendency that, very simply, if I'm a king before the Satavahanas, even if I don't have money, I will never give land grant in lieu of salary or as form of appeasement. They have created precedents wherein it is okay to give a person something which could destroy the treasury also, and also create a political center which is parallel to the state itself. So, very simply, try to understand this. I am the DM of Agra. If the government of India is giving me 1,10,000 as my salary, am I bound to be under pressure from the government of India? Yes or no? Yes, because if something happens, my salary will be stopped. Now, what the government of India, there's a financial emergency which happens in India, and the government is incapable of giving me my salary. So now what the government of India does is they say that you collect the revenue of Agra as district collector and district magistrate, and you keep it, and you keep it, and by keeping that, that is your salary itself. So don't I now have absolute power over Agra to do whatever I want to do? So it's not about reduction or stopping. It's about giving a person an absolute power. By giving a person a land grant, you are basically giving that person absolute power over that area, both in fiscal and in political terms. This concept was introduced by Satavahanas. Before Satavahanas, nobody used to do this. But the Satavahanas basically introduced a poison which spread throughout the Indian society and economy and polity, and it became okay by the later Gupta period to give tax-free land grants in lieu of salary. Are you getting my point? Yes or no? So, before I go to the Guptas, see, try to understand this point. Satavahanas very rarely gave it to officers, but later Satvahana rulers did give it. Later Satvahana rulers did give it, because by the later Satvahana period, Roman trade started to decline. The stronger did not give, but the weaker did. Now, please pay attention to what I'm trying to argue here. Gupta's rise in 300, 350 CE and go on till 650 CE generally. That is their period, 4th to 6th or 7th century, 3rd to 4th or 3rd to 7th, whatever you want to use. That is as per your starting point. Now, before the Guptas are rising, there are 3 to 4 things which have happened. Multiple foreign dynasties had got assimilated into Indian society. Satavahanas introduced land grant tendencies which were even used by Kushanas and Sakas. Further, Roman trade started to decline with decline of Roman Empire, and therefore when the Guptas are coming to the picture, Guptas were local powers and local intermediaries who were strengthened by the process of land grant. So very simply, Guptas do not come out of thin air. They were rather strengthened by the Kushana tradition of giving grants when money contracted. So the question is, where did the Guptas come from? The Kushanas created the Guptas, and the Satavahanas actually created the Vakatakas. They were officers, yes, they were local intermediaries who got more and more land grants from the Kushanas, and that in turn produced, see, Kushanas gave rise to the Guptas, and the Satavahanas, which we will discuss next week, gave rise to the Vaka Takas. The Vaka Takas. Simple point is Vakatakas. Simple point is that Guptas and Vakatakas were both products of the land grant tradition and decentralized tendencies developing. Are we clear with regards to this? Are you now able to understand where would the Guptas come from? Where is this whole story going? Very simply, the Guptas and the Vakatakas were local intermediaries, Marathis, Mahabhojas, who actually were benefited with this land grant tradition. That is why I say that Satavahanas introduced something which was too dangerous for the economy of and the polity of this period. If this is clear, then I go back to Satvahana economy and then start Guptas properly. Okay. So, last point, the Satvahana economy, coins have been excavated in quite a lot of places. Die struck, even cast coins are there, which is crude coins. Silver, copper, lead, potin was used. Can anybody tell me which metal is missing here? What does this indicate? What does it indicate? Yes, declining economy. The more the economy declines, the more the problem is, and the more the land grants are given. And the Satvana coins had different symbols on them. Do not learn this, do not learn. Just that we will discuss this again when we will discuss numismatics. Potin is a mixture of copper and silver. Now, we have reached the Gupta period. We started in the morning with the Mauryas. We have taken a long journey from Mauryas to Shungas to Indo-Greeks to Shakas to Kushanas to Satavahanas. But as I said, central to the story is process of caste formation, and more than that, we also discuss the concept of how the Satavahanas introduce something which will become a standard practice. But when I say Gupta age to you, what is the first image which comes to your mind? When I say Gupta age to you, what is the first thing which comes to your mind? Art, gold times, Chandragupta trade, golden age, temple, education. See, people tend to argue that the Gupta period is a golden age. However, there are two problems in this understanding. Whilst the Gupta period would be the golden age of culture and cultural development, the Gupta period politically, except for few rulers, was a very problematic phase for polity. And the reason is that the Empire, the Gupta Empire was a decentralized empire with core and periphery. But what the Guptas did more was they accelerated the process of fragmentation. Can I discuss this aspect with you? How is that the Guptas accelerated the process of fragmentation? Are these words making sense to you? Decentralized polity, land grant, core periphery, I will discuss. Simple point is acceleration of fragmentation means the destruction of the empire. Can I discuss why are they ones who actually led to the acceleration of fragmentation? Yes? Okay. Now this goes back to the origin. This goes back to the origin of the Guptas. It is believed that Guptas, though they came to power, were actually Vaishyas. This is a standard historical narrative that Guptas, when they came to power, were actually Vaishyas. But the problem is that if you're a Vaishya ruler, do you get equal respect as a Kshatriya ruler? No. So, what we believe is, we means the historical texts, and what evidence we have is, in order to change their status from Vaishyas to Kshatriyas, Guptas accelerated and appeased the Brahmin community with more and more land grants. Very simply, Guptas are believed to have changed their genealogical history from being a Vaishya to a Kshatriya by very simply appeasing the Brahmins, and the Brahmins, who would then do rituals, would project the Guptas not as Vaishyas but as Kshatriyas. Because the Brahmins control how the Indian society works, or how this Indian society basically knowledge system works, they had the power, or the power was given to the Brahmins by the Guptas to change their status in the political and public eye. But the cost for that was more and more land grants were given to Brahmins in order to appease them, and therefore the process of land grants was further accelerated by the Guptas, therefore leading to further fragmentation. So the simple point is that the way the Brahmin community, multiple thousands of grants were given in order to keep the status like that, and further also project a certain image of the Guptas. So when we talk about the Guptas, 2 chapters in R.S. Sharma, 1 chapter in NCRT, the context of the Guptas is very straightforward. After the breakup of the Mauryan Empire, Kushanas and Satavahanas were controlling north and south. And the Kushanas started to give land grants to the Guptas as local power intermediaries, and they emerged out of that in that context only. But what we believe is that they were actually Vaishyas, and they were the ones who changed their status in order to basically become Kshatriya status, and that accelerated the whole process itself and in turn lead to further fragmentation. Are you getting my point? Is this making sense? Who introduced first land grants? Satavahanas. Large-scale land grants to the Brahmins suggest that the Brahmin supremacy increased in Gupta period. The Guptas, who probably were originally Vaishyas, came to be looked upon as Kshatriyas by Brahmins, and that presented their Gupta kings as godlike attributes, and Kshatriya stated itself. This further led to the Brahmins accumulating wealth on account of numerous land grants, and this was the process which will basically create a major problematic tradition in India. And the later Gupta rulers are actually going to give more and more land grants as we go on. Are you able to understand this concept that Guptas came to power with a certain status? The status was changed. Therefore, Guptas did not arrest the process of fragmentation, rather accelerated the process of fragmentation, something which was started by the Satavahanas. Because now, very simply, I am moving towards medieval. And what I am discussing, what I am creating the context for, is that when Gori came to India, India was extremely fragmented. Political fragmentation was the basic characteristics of the polity. Now the point is, how did that happen? How did that happen? That is the question. Why is that when Gajni and Gori came, nobody came together? And the answer to that question is, Satavahanas introduced a certain tradition which only led to further fragmentation as we go on in history. Is this making sense to you? I am very simply now creating the context for something we will do further. Yes, sir. Okay. Now, the testament to the fact that Gupta period culturally was actually the golden age. But when we talk about politically, when you look at this map, you see a area which is dark pink. And you see an area which is marked by pink. Which is this. Now, the reason for this is basically Gupta power was direct here and indirect here, which is called core and periphery. Whilst the core area will expand, there will always remain a periphery for the Gupta polity. Why? The same true of Vakatakas also, because they have created so much area which is not under the payroll of the king or under the taxable area of the king, or very simply, except for Samudragupta, Chandragupta to Vikramaditya, nobody actually really had the power to subdue these intermediaries which were created by the Kushanas and the Satavahanas. So the reason why Mauryas are considered Mauryas and are considered so important in Indian history is there was no polity in India which was ever able to match the Mauryans, because of the fact that the Mauryans were a fully centralized empire. So I tried to emphasize this three ways to tell you how the Gupta period is a period of political decentralization, and how they did not arrest it, stop it, and how they accelerated it. If these 3 points are clear, then I go into the more factual section of our discussion, which is what are the sources, who are the rulers, this and that. This is the conceptual part, something which we are building up for next week in that regard. Yes? Come on, yeah, come on. Last 1.5 hours. Gupta period is called golden age because of culture. Kalidasa, Amar Simha, temple building, everything will happen under this period. But politically, it is not a golden age. Yes, okay. So, first and foremost thing, how do we know about the Guptas? How do we know about the Guptas. And remember, in this map, you see the Sakas are still somewhere in there. The Shakas are still, the Western Shatatas is nothing but Shakas. They will be later managed or fully controlled by Samudragupta. Okay. Now, what are the sources? Because you need to remember the sources for the examination. So we know about Gupta administration out of a book called Niti Sara by Kamandaka. Then how Chandragupta I came to power is it in the Kamudi Mahotsava. Then the ones which I'm marking is important. You have a Mrichikatika written by Sudraka, which talks about a story of a Brahmin called Charudatta who falls in the love with Vasantasena. Then Vishakadatta. What is the other text we refer to Vishakadatta for? Come on. Vishakadatta, which text did we discuss? Okay, Mudrakshara. Very good. Vishakadatta, Mudrakshara, and Devi Chandragupta. These are the two texts which have written by Vishakadatta. This came in the examination. Devi Chandragupta and Vishakadatta came in the examination. Thereafter, you have Somadeva who talks about the spread of Indian culture in Southeast Asia. Not important to us. Three texts, Niti Sara, Mrichikatika, Devi Chandraguptam. Then the next most important source of the Gupta period are actually inscriptions. Inscriptions are very common during this period. And then you have the Prayagraj Prasasti or the Allahabad Prasasti, which is one of the most celebrated of all of the Gupta texts because the poet of Samudragupta, Harisena, actually wrote a very important prasasti for him, which is a praise and gave us an account of how he conquered the Indian subcontinent. Thereafter, you have the Iran prasasti, which again talks about the Samudragupta conquest. Nalanda copper plate inscription, very, very important. This is a very important inscription because this is actually a land grant charter. It talks about how Samudragupta gave a Brahmin a grant of a land from which we get to know that Samudragupta himself was appeasing Brahmins. Then we have Gaya copper plate inscription, again the second most important, which talks about how a Sri Lankan king, Mahameghavarma, wanted to develop a vihara, which is a monastic hostel in the Gaya sector. And Samudragupta gave a land grant that you want to construct something, okay, you take land and construct it. So we get to know about this, not Iran. Iran is a place in India. Thereafter, MP, it's not Iran. Come on. The simple point is Samudragupta village to Mahameghavarma. Very important, he did allow for it and also gave land for it. Thereafter, we know one of the most celebrated inscriptions of the Gupta period, which is nothing but the Mehrauli iron pillar, which is Chandragupta to Vikramaditya. Has no connection with Vikramaditya, but he's called Chandragupta to Vikramaditya. This is the iron pillar which never rusts, made out of a very important alloy which does not allow this iron to rust, where in the Kutub complex itself. Then we already know Junagadh inscription, Rudradaman, previously Chandragupta Maurya, then Ashoka, and then how Skandagupta and his officers then reconstructed this Sudarshan Lake again. Pune copper plate inscription by a very important personality, the daughter of Chandragupta to Vikramaditya, Prabhavati Gupta gave a grant. So land grant by the daughter of the king was also common. And last but not the least is Mansoor inscription, which tells us how the Guptas declined. How the Guptas declined. And very simply, this was issued by Yashovarman, who's the successor of the Guptas itself. So here you have to remember Nalanda, Gaya, and Junagadh along with Mehrauli. I can't help you, but I've marked the ones which are very, very important. Clear? I'll give you a short break here if needed. and then we'll come back and then go into the political history of the Guptas. Yes? Okay. So it is what? 6:16. We come back at 6:26. Thereafter, we go back to back till 8 o'clock. Done? Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, welcome back. All set, all refresh. Last 1.5 hours. Come on. Can we start? Okay. When we talk about the rulers, you have Shri Gupta, Chandragupta 1, Samudragupta. He is one of the most important. Then you have Chandragupta 2, Vikramaditya, second most important. Kumar Gupta is important generally because of the fact that he is the founder of the Nalanda University. Third, Skand Gupta, Narsim Gupta, Baladitya, and last is Vishnu Gupta. Now, these three are considered the most powerful of the whole set itself. And Shri Gupta, founder, took the title Maharaja. And Shri Gupta was the one who actually again patronized everybody and built a Buddhist monastery in the area what we call today as the Bihar sector. Now, a very important point, the traveler Itsing came under Shri Gupta. So we know about Shri Gupta through that source also. And his successor, Chandragupta I, was the one who consolidated the empire. So the first most important rule of the Gupta period, married a Lichvi prince in Nepal so as to consolidate his northern sector, used matrimonial alliances very, very well. And he started, as I told you in the afternoon, seems like eternity itself, a new concept called the Gupta era or Gupta age or Gupta calendar, in which the starting point is considered to be 319 and it marks his accession to the rule, but it became not very common. Basically, nobody uses it today and nobody really cares about this also. It is the Saka Samvat and the rather Vikram era, which is more common and used all across the Indian subcontinent. Gupta era, generally nobody uses. Thereafter, the greatest of all, which is Samudragupta, successor, exactly the opposite of Ashoka when it comes to orientation, a great conqueror, but never had any guilt or remorse for it. He very simply was extremely forward in asking his poet Harisena to write a glorifying account of his wars generally. Now, you don't have to learn this, you do not learn. But this is, if you read the Prayag Prashasti and along with that, the general other inscriptions which talk about it conquest, we put his conquest into five basic categories. Now, I want you to note how the language of the conquest changes and how even decentralization is projected out of the language. You see, the first group is the princes of Ganga and Yamuna were subdued and conquered, defeated and incorporated. This means direct. These are the Maharathis, the Mahabhojas of this sector. Second group is the rulers of Eastern Himalayan sector, Nepal, Assam, Bengal, and they were again incorporated, direct. Then these include the kingdoms of the Vindhya region and the simple point of the whole Vindhya Satpura range, together direct control. But now you see how the language changes. Group 4 and Group 5, he conquered and liberated, and Samudragupta's arm reached as far as in Kanchi, Pallavas, who recognized his suzerainty. And the Sakas and the Kusanas, whatever was left of them, also accepted his suzerainty. Now comes a word which I hope you know, but I'll explain to you. What do you mean by suzerainty? This is the corollary or a word which is actually related to decentralization. No idea? not decentralization. See, please pay attention. There are two words. You know one very well, sovereignty, and the other one is suzerainty. So let's try to understand what is sovereignty. What is sovereignty? What is sovereignty? Come on. Free to take decisions, independent external power, free from outside control. If I say that sovereignty means internal plus external freedom, would it be a right way of saying it? Yes. Suzerainty is internal freedom, but except the overlordship of a suzerain and have no external freedom. I'll give you a very simple example of this and you will actually realize, understand the difference between sovereignty and suzerainty. For example, you are preparing for UPSC. You are. And you live in Delhi. And you take a room. So when you are preparing alone with a Delhi room, you are a sovereign. Because what happens inside this room and outside this room is very simply your own prerogative. You dictate internal and external relations. If you want to come back at 12, you come back at 12. If you want to come back at 1, you can come at 1. You can interact with anybody. You can do anything. This is called true sovereignty, which is that you have internal freedom and external freedom both. India is a sovereign country. We dictate how we interact with other countries also. And we also interact how our internal affairs are going to work. Anybody has any issue here? No. Now, the other side of this is that you are preparing with your parents. That you are at your home. So you have a small room here. This is the main gate. And this is your room. Now, when you are preparing at home with your parents or when you are at home generally, you are not a sovereign. Because most probably, in good probability, you don't even do that. But what you do within your room is up to you, which is internal freedom. However, as soon as you step out and interact with the world, you are dictated by your father, mother, or parents, who are the suzerain, who decide how, when, where, what, everything, when you come, when you go, what will you eat, everything. Here, you are accepting the overlordship of the suzerain or the overlord itself. You have internal freedom, but externally you are bound by or dictated by someone else. Does this make sense? In political terms, the local intermediary is internally free, can do whatever he wants, how he interacts with the people. However, he symbolically accepts the power of the Guptas or the ruler as a form of accepting power. Is this making sense? What do you mean by suzerainty? So suzerainty is the new model which was coming through rather than sovereignty. The most sovereign leader would be whom? The most sovereign leader would be whom in Indian history till this point? Most sovereign leader, sovereign. Very good, Ashoka. And what we see here is very simply a model of suzerainty based control. Is this making sense? Am I making sense? Yes or no? Come on. Okay. We know the Mahameghavarma incident. Sri Lanka wanted permission to build a temple. He gave the land. Coins portray him playing Veena. We will discuss Gupta coinage when we will discuss numismatics. So, till this point, suzerainty. Again, understand this point. If you are not understanding, to tell me. I'll move forward if not. Sovereign means India as a sovereign nation. India as a sovereign nation, internal, external freedom both. In a suzerainty based model, it is a decentralized model. You don't have power to destroy the overlord. So you accept the fact that you get internal freedom. But symbolically, you send some tribute or money to the overlord who is basically powerful enough to control you, but not that powerful to destroy you. And you are powerful enough to remain internally freedom or have internal freedom, but not powerful enough to remove the external or what we call as the overlord. Gupta, this area, please understand, this area is of sovereignty. This area is of sovereignty. This area is of suzerainty. Are you getting my point? Sushmita, making sense? Now, okay. The next major ruler of the Guptas was Chandragupta II Vikramaditya. He was the one who actually expanded the empire to its highest point. From Western Malwa to Gujarat to the Shakas, everybody was conquered by him only. And he extended the empire by matrimonial alliances, again a standard thing which would have happened at this point of time. Fahian visits the court of Chandragupta II Vikramaditya and tells us the account of how his reign was generally. The Qutub Minar Mehrauli inscription or the Mehrauli pillar is of Chandragupta II Vikramaditya. But the most important contribution of Chandragupta Vikramaditya, why he is considered the most important ruler, because culturally he had what are called the Navaratans of Chandragupta Vikramaditya, which included Kalidas, Amarsimha, Vishakadatta, and Dhanvantri. Dhanvantri is basically a very important physician, and these three turned out to be the most important writers of this point of time. But Kalidas is the one who very simply UPSC loves, and his works are asked from time to time. For example, we all know that Abhigan Shakuntalam, which is the story of Shakuntala with the story of a king called Dushyanta. Malvika Agnimitra has already been asked in the examination, which is the love story between Agnimitra, Shunga king, and Malvika. The next question which can be asked if they want to ask Kalidas would be Vikram or Visham, which is a marriage between Vikramaditya and Urvashi. Kumar Sambhavam is the story of Parvati and Shiva. Meghdut, a very interesting name used by the government of India also in different contexts. Meghdut gives us a story of a Megh, which is a cloud, which takes a message from the Vindhya region and takes it to the Himalayan sector. Very interesting because it tells us how good they have an understanding of Vindhya Satpura range and the geography of India. Then you have Ritu Samagra, which is Ritus, the seasons of India, and an incomplete story called the Raghuvamsha. Now, for me, Abhigan Shakuntalam and the Vikram story are the two which have not been asked. So you can just learn these. Malvika Agnimitra has already been asked in that regard. On the other hand, there are other poets also who wrote a lot under Chandragupta II Vikramaditya. We have Panchtantra written by Vishnu Sharma himself, a very important contributor, again came in the examination. Amarsimha wrote the Sanskrit grammar book called the the Amar Kosha. Then you have Varuchi, who wrote the Prakrit lexicon, Varuchi, grammar book of Prakrit. Dhanvantri, Ayurveda, and a very important physician. Shushruta, this book of surgery, was also written during his period. And the most celebrated and most important astronomer, astrologer of India and mathematician, Aryabhatta, was also the one, or very simply, was the one who was patronized by Chandragupta to Vikramaditya. So very simply, he changed the way culture went forward. This is why Gupta period is called the golden age of culture. Literature, culture, art, architecture, all needs to be learned. All this needs to be learned by you. Cannot ignore it, but standard process of learning each one day will not kill you. Now, taking the political history forward, the next most important ruler is Kumar Gupta. He is the one who established the Nalanda University. Comes as a standard question in the examination. Who established the Nalanda University? And that is Kumar Gupta, performed the Ashwamedha Yagya. And very simply, he established the first major and the most celebrated of all universities in India generally. Thereafter, you have Skand Gupta. He will now start to face a problem. And the problem which he inherited from his father was the fact that the Huns, who are a Central Asian tribe, will start to now make the northwestern sector problematic. And he and his successors and his predecessor all had the problem of now having a border which was problematic. This Mauryas did not have, this the post-Gupta rulers did not have. But the Guptas were now fighting on the northwestern sector also. The Junagadh inscription talks about his governor again repairing it, and he was the one who defeated the Huns very successfully. And for that, he established a pillar like his great grandfather, which is Chandragupta Vikramaditya at Betari. Now, last two rulers tell us how things were becoming actually really bad, which is Narsinggutta Baladitya, one of the last rulers. Yunsang tells us that he embraced Buddhism. He went on to do that, and he defeated Mihir Kula, the Huna king, then pardoned him. Thereafter, Vishnu Gupta is the last documented ruler of the Gupta dynasty, and we believe that the feudatories of the Guptas, who were created by the Guptas in the process of land grants, then parceled the empire into different parts itself. This is basically the political history of the Guptas, what we have to understand before we go to administration. Now, very simply, I know this is becoming more and more heavy, but I will give you a very simple timeline in the end. Don't worry. Last half an hour, I'll put in to give you master timelines, so you don't have to worry about that. But a simple point is multiple names are there, multiple contributions are there. But if you see, for each ruler, one major fact is important. Nalanda Kumar Gupta, Huna Kumar Gupta starting, thereafter Narsinggutta Baladitya, Skanda problems, then Samudragupta, Chandragupta to Vikramaditya, the most celebrated culturally. Every ruler has 1 to 2 facts. These facts are enough, very simply, to answer any question. Summarize Gupta. How do you summarize Gupta when there are multiple rulers? Guptas, I have discussed 3 things with you. First, their origin, their tendency of giving land grants, and their political history. Political history, each ruler you have to remember one fact. This can you remember? Because then administration and then this section is over. There's nothing more here. Dhunas were problematic for 3 generations. Yes. Later also they will come back. Once the Guptas will decline, the white Hunas will establish themselves in the northwestern sector. You have to be more vocal. You have to say something. There needs to be a feedback loop. Come on. Still 1 hour is left. And you're already dying. Okay. Now, when we talk about administration, it's not as elaborate as the Mauryan period. But again, terms are there. As I told you, Gupta and Mauryas, there are terms. Sure, Vivek. The biggest unit is the empire, obviously. Thereafter, it was to appease the Brahmins to change the status. That is the basic point. Empire, biggest unit. Then comes the province. Uparika is the governor. Then you have the Vishyas, who are managed by Vishyapatis. This is district and DM. And then you have the village Grama. Simple, straightforward. What you have to remember is Grama, Vishya, Bhukta. Bhukta, Vishya, Grama. That's it. Uparika, Vishyapati are the two officers which take care of it. Simple, straightforward, not very problematic. Now, when we talk about the Guptas, we also have other terminologies which thankfully are just a repetition of terms which were there in the previous period. So we know that Bhukti or Deshas were the biggest. Thereafter, Uparika is the one who takes care of it. Then you have Vishya and Vishyapati, not an issue. But the point is, thereafter, you have different type of smaller settlements. For example, Vithi, Pata, Bhumi, Petha. These are different type of smaller settlements. There's no straightforward term for it. But what we can see is that they all were managed by an Ayukta. Ayukt, a person who is an officer is an Ayukt. You're very simply a term which we still today use. So you are appointed to something, Ayukta. So Ayukta takes care of different types of settlements which are there, but there's no very simple, straightforward connection between the term and the officer. Thereafter, Guptas also use different officer ranks in their inscriptions. They should take very big names also. Mahadari Raja, Parameshwara, this and that. But in certain texts, we find a term called Kumaramatya. And in certain texts, we also find the term Amatya. We believe Amatya is a smaller term and a smaller officer, and a Kumaramatya is a bigger officer. And the Kumaramatya could be appointed by the king, could also be in the revenue department. Very fluid terminology. But you tell me one thing, have you heard the word Amatya before? You would have. Amatya, have you heard Mauryan administration? What is an executive officer called? Amatya. So very simply, if you learn it in Mauryas, you see the word still remains. And Kumaramatya is a word which is given for a bigger rank. That's it. So because the Guptas were not very centralized, their terms are lesser, but persistence of terms in that regard. The last pain which is there for the Guptas is to know the officers which take care of certain things. In the close-knit area of where they had direct control, these are the officers which were there. So for example, we have the Sandhi Vigrahaka. Now tell me one thing, what does Sandhi mean? What does Sandhi mean? Treaty, Sandhi, foreign affairs. Sandhi means treaty. So straightforward. Kumaramatya we know already, higher officer. Then you have Mahabala Adhikrita. Bal means what? Bal means what? Power. Very good. So power comes from the military sector. Power, Baladhikrita. Thereafter, Danda, police. Shalk, the customs. Hiranika, tax collector. Mahadandanaika, chief justice. Now you tell me one thing. If these terms come, aren't they self-explanatory? If you look at it, they are actually self-explanatory. Within themselves, they have the answer itself. Most probably UPSC won't play with them also for the same reason, because they're self-explanatory. But thank God we don't have to learn them separately. You just use very simply your basic logic, and you will come to the answer. You will come to the answer. Now, social, we've already discussed. Now I have to discuss a very important concept with you. Two important concepts with you, and then we can very simply end this section. Can I have two very important conversations with you? I've discussed till this point Gupta administration, Gupta rulers, Gupta names, and Gupta political contributions. I know it is heavy. Obviously, it is a weekend batch. So the more we go forward, the more I tell you. But I can very successfully say to you that we have gone through the painful part, the factual part. We started the morning with Mauryan administration. We've reached Gupta. And we started with the centralized empire, discussed all of these different smaller dynasties. We've discussed the concept of land grants. We've discussed the concept of Vedic Brahmanism. We've seen Vedic revivalism. We've discussed caste formation. And we've also discussed the concept of Saka, Vikram, and all these eras. So very simply, what is expected is that throughout the next week, you are going to revise this before we meet again on Saturday. But if anybody has any issue till this point, I am open to take a call, any question you want. Because now when I talk about what I'm going to talk about are again issues which are not going to come in the examination, which is further Varna Samskara, caste formation, and Bhagavatism. There are two things which are not relevant for the examination but are important for the Gupta period itself. So can I presume that everybody is alive with me without fainted and is understanding everything? If you have a doubt, if you have a question, you ask me right now. I'm happy to answer, repeat any section if you want to ask me about. I'll enable the live call feature also. If you want to call and ask, be my guest. Yes. Hodgepodge is because a long day. Understanding the concept is totally different concept. Repeat the rulers of chronological order of rulers. See, this is the chronological order of Gupta rulers. For me, facts are not important right now. Concepts are important. If you are up with the concepts, we'll take it. That is what is the takeaway. Obviously, facts need revision. For me, what is more important is, are you understanding the concept itself? Yes? Acha. Okay. We are in good flow. We can proceed. Great. So let's do that. Now, there are two things which we need to understand. We'll come back to the economic terms later. I have to explain just two things. First is further caste formation. What were the three processes which we used or which we understood, which led to Varna Samskara previously? Three processes, which I told you previously. Assimilation, integration, and cross, which you mean is intermixing. Very good. So, the processes which were there were assimilation plus integration plus intermixing equals to Varna Samskara. Very good. Now pay attention. See, the Guptas needed to give. I'm coming into focus. 1 second. Now I should be fine. Yeah. The Guptas very simply accelerated the process of land grants. We know that because They needed to appease the Brahmins, so they very simply gave more and more land grants in that regard. But the Guptas also did one more thing in giving these land grants. Most of this is Gupta period. Most of these land grants were given in frontier areas where there were tribal population. So what the Guptas actually did was that by sending a Brahmin to the tribal sector, the tribal population of the Indian subcontinent got assimilated due to this process. And once tribal population got assimilated, it led to further Varna Samskara, which means that if I add the post-Gupta, rather not, if I add the post-Maurya plus Gupta processes, Jati or caste formation was a product of integration and assimilation of foreign population plus intermixing through exogamous marriages plus integration and assimilation of tribal population through the process of land grants. These two things happen in the post Mauryan period, and this happened in the Gupta period. Is this making sense? Is this making sense? That further assimilation made it more and more what we call as heterogeneous. First point is integration and assimilation of foreign population. Exogamous marriages between the same foreign population where intermixing of Varna started to happen. That in turn led to further caste and Jati formation. And then in the Gupta period, when tribals started to get assimilated, they were again added as a new Jatis and castes within the same Varna identity. Am I making sense? Yes, no? Okay. Now you see. Caste proliferation into numerous subcastes was a result of two factors. A large number of foreigners had been assimilated into the Indian society, and each group of foreigners was a kind of a caste. As the foreigners largely came for conquerors, they were mostly assimilated in the Kshatriya community. The other reason for the increase in number of castes was the absorption of many tribal people into the Brahmanical society through the process of land grants. The position of Sudras and women both improved a little bit in this period, in the Gupta period, because they were allowed to listen to the most important epics such as the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. But one more thing was that for the first time, Shudras were given the status of agriculturalists or were allowed to be agricultural labor. With more and more land getting integrated into the economy itself, there was a need for labor, and that came from the fact that the Shudra identity or the Shudra economic identity changed from just being maintenance of the society to now becoming agriculturist also, because the need for labor started to increase more and more. And the process of, however, Untouchability did crystallize. One specific group within the Shudras became more and more excluded from the society itself, which are the Chandals. And this is again a very bad practice which started in the Mauryan period and became more and more integrated or crystallized in the Gupta period. Women were allowed to listen to Mahabharata, Ramayana, worship Krishna. However, they did not get any economic status change itself. The subordination of women still remained more and more entrenched in the upper varnas and the upper caste, where whilst in the Shudra community, still women had certain acts, we can say certain room to go into economic activities. So before we go into economy, the Gupta period is generally considered a period of consolidation of or expansion at the same time of the concept of caste and the process of Varna Samskara. Does this make sense? After reading it through the PPT, does it make sense? Perfect. Now, last section, after that we discuss Bhagavatism. When we talk about economy, we already know that land was under cultivation was called Kshetra. We will now look at these terms, very, very important. Land which was not cultivated was called Khila. Then a, a term which is given for different types of what we call as uncultivable land is also Apaharta. Craft specialization is there. Multiple type of crafts are being done that you don't have to worry about. There's also a movement of luxury products. Again, doesn't matter to us. These terms are what really matters to us. And now come the terms which are extremely important for you. Bhaga was the grain share or the land revenue of the king, and that was 1/6 of the agricultural produce. Now tell me one thing. Has this term changed over the course of history of ancient India? No. Somehow what started in the later Vedic period remained the same. Bhaga. So you see how in history there's continuity also. Further, we also have reference to Bhoga and Kara as two important taxes along with Bhaga. Bhoga basically is like Bali in the sense that it's a periodical supply of things, flowers, fruits, firewood to the king. So it's like a involuntary, but we have to compulsory offering to the king. And Kara, we already know, is a generic tax for anything. However, Bali at this point of time changes its meaning in the sense, one second, going again out of focus, that camera is acting up for some reason. Okay. Bali is a different type of tax itself. Whilst in earlier periods, it was like Bhoga. Here it is like an surcharge. So if you owe something to the king, maybe a Buddhist or a religious cess, you can think of it like that. What you give as Bhaga, Bali can be added over it. So you have Bhaga, land revenue, Bali, a surcharge on land revenue, Bhoga, compulsory offerings to the king, and Kara, which is a standard tax. So please pay attention to the word when it comes in the examination. What context is Bali being asked? If it says Bali in the Gupta period, which they will not ask like that, but you have to pay attention that it is not a compulsory offering. Bali, what we know of in the Vedic period or the what we call as the early Vedic period, has now become Bhoga in that regard. Then you have urban taxes also. For example, Uparikara. Uparikara is a term which is paid by a tenant. Tenant tax. If you don't own your land, you are a tenant. If you own your land, you're a farmer. So tenant tax, very simply, is called Uparikara. Thereafter, Shulk is basically toll. And a person who collects it is called Sholkika. Not a big issue for us. But a very important institution emerges during this period, and That is called Shreni. This is the last major thing about the Guptas, and I will consolidate everything. Don't worry. Shreni. What do you mean by Shreni? Shreni is basically guild or merchant or artisanal, or what we call as artisanal groups or organizations. Do you understand trade unions? Do you understand what is a trade union? Trade union is nothing but when all the different workers come together and unionize and become one. Same way Shreni. However, Shreni is not workers. Shreni is, for example, all the blacksmiths come together and become one organization. All the goldsmiths become one and become one organization. All the exporters come and together and become one organization. It's a Shreni, guild, and they negotiate with the king and the society as one. So basically, it's an organization of artisans, or you can call organization of merchants, or it's a guild. The word is guild. Guild is basically the concept of people coming together or artisans coming together who do the same work to negotiate as a group. Make sense? Make sense? Yes? Okay. Now, let me consolidate. Let me consolidate. What have we done for Guptas? We've done Gupta origin. Anybody has problem in that? I'm going to ask you each and every section. Vaishya origin, basically change the status by giving land grants. No. Then we did Gupta political history, basic things you need to know about each and every ruler. Anybody has any issue there? No. Then we did the sources, no issues there generally. Thereafter, we've done the formation of caste and how the Brahmins themselves become landed community. Any issue there in that understanding? No. And we've done terms for administration and economy, for which you basically need to revise. Now, if all of this makes sense, what I want to do with you very simply is that I want to discuss one concept with you, and then I want to consolidate. Brahmadaya was, again, don't use the word Brahmadaya. That's a very Chola word. Vivek, don't do that. This is the problem. You go either forward or backward, or your the understanding is. I know you know the term Brahmadaya. Spelling is incorrect though. But Brahmadaya is not a concept which is used for the Gupta period. It's a very post-Gupta Cholaist term. Okay. Now, till this point, whatever I've done, I will consolidate with a master timeline. Don't worry. But I want to discuss something which is the concept of Hinduism. Because the Gupta period is also the period in which we see Vedic Brahmanism going away and diluting itself to become what we today call as Hinduism. Can I discuss that process and why was it so important? There's no voluntary tax. Everything is compulsory. Okay. Now see, Vedic Brahmanism was based on the Vedas. Ritual centric, sacrifice centric. And because of that, Buddhism was very, very popular for a very long time. Now the Satavahanas were Brahmins, the Guptas were Brahmins, the Vakatakas were Brahmins. So that allowed for Brahmins to gather a little bit of control back. For the first time, after a very long time in the Gupta period, a very powerful kingdom gave the Brahmins power back. And by this point of time, they had emerged as a landed community also. And they were also becoming more and more powerful. So now the Brahmins sit and think, why is that we are losing to Buddhism? And the consensus which is built up at this point of time, Guptas are not Brahmins. Guptas are Vaishyas who became Kshatriyas. Guptas empowered the Brahmins because of the process of their change of status, and therefore Brahmanical revivalism had become very, very common since the Satvahana period. Are we all with consensus to this concept? That revivalism was there and the Buddhism was mostly dominating till the Gupta period, generally as a state religion. Yes, no, I have to be more clear about it. Yes, okay. Now, the consensus which was coming through in Vedic Brahmanism was, we need to change our status. When did I say that Guptas are Brahmins? How were Guptas Brahmin? Avani, when did I say that? Did I say Guptas are Brahmins? I said Guptas supported Brahmins. Vakatakas are Brahmins, Satavahanas are Brahmins, Gupta supported Brahmins. Now, the consensus, yes, they gave Brahmins state land grant to change the status. Now, the consensus which came through was that we need to change the emphasis of text. And what they did was, moving away from the Vedas, they said, let's base our major religious understanding on the Bhagavat Puran. Puranas are a whole plethora of texts which are there, written throughout the Mauryan to the Gupta period. But the Bhagavat Puran has a very important distinction. And the distinction is that it has mention and explanations of the Dashavatar of Lord Vishnu. And basically, Vedic Brahmanism absorbs Bhagavatism to become Hinduism, in the way that Dashavatar concept allowed for Vedic Brahmanism to become very, very assimilatory. All local gods, all gods which were very powerful in different sectors, now could be brought into one larger fold, which is called Hinduism, wherein Lord Venkateshwara, Lord Vishnu, Lord Padmanabhaswamy, Lord Vishnu, Lord Jagannathan, Lord Vishnu. Very simply, gods could be brought together and now came within the concept of Bhagavatism. But the master stroke of the Brahmins at this point of time was how they undercut Buddhism. Can I tell you that? Everybody's following me till this point. How does the Dashavtar concept allow for assimilatory understanding of what we call as the local gods and becoming more and more liberal and more open? But the way they actually undercut Buddhism was, or Lord Vishnu, Buddha, in one stroke, they diluted the whole argument of Buddhism. They argued that, okay, you've been following a person called Buddha. He's Lord Vishnu. So in a way, you are also Lord Vishnu. Or what we call as, you are also worshipping Lord Vishnu. So by arguing that one of the avatars of Lord Vishnu is Buddha, they undercut the base of Buddhism itself. They undercut the base of Buddhism itself. So till Bhagavatism, Buddhism remained as an exclusive concept. But as soon as Bhagavad Puran became the larger emphasis of Hinduism, Buddha was integrated into the Dashavatar concept. And now the Buddhists can go around saying anything that no, he's not Vishnu. He's not Vishnu. And this is how Hinduism very quickly overtook and then more or less made Buddhism a footnote after the Gupta period. And that is why Hinduism is a very, very, very open system. We don't have any specific day we need to go to the temple. We do not have any form of what we call as textual control. Also, we can read the Bhagavad Gita, we can read the Mahabharata, we can read the Ramayana, we can read anything what we want to read. You can go to, you can worship any god, multiple gods, and Bhakti movement also changed it, which is the personalization of God, which we'll discuss by next week. The simple point is, this was the master stroke of the Vedic Brahmanistic fold, which is to very simply destroy the base of Buddhism by arguing, and that is the concept. By till today, if you will actually Google the 10 avatars of Vishnu, one Buddha. Buddha was made a part of the Bhagavad Puranic Hinduistic pantheon. Again, not something which will be asked in the examination, but I hope you can realize what I'm trying to tell you here. What I say as Vedic Brahmanism is a early form of Hinduism which is based on the Vedas. We today don't follow the processes which were laid out by the Vedas, rather the Puranas and the Upanishads. And that is what is called as modern day Hinduism, which is also a product of the Bhakti movement. And this process will keep on going on when we'll discuss what we call as the Bhakti movement, North Indian and South Indian Bhakti. We'll discuss that in the medieval context, last module of the medieval sector. Does this give you some clarity, understanding, or some new information for your understanding vis-a-vis how Buddhism basically lost out to what we call as Hinduism? Yes, very simply, what we follow today is what was called Puranic Hinduism. Bhagavad Puranic Hinduism. Footnote means small text. Come on, your issue is footnote. Footnote is small text. Can I now consolidate everything for today via master timelines? Can I do that? In a way, the teaching is done for today. We are now going to just revise together. Yes? Okay. Before I do that, anybody has any doubt? Previous year questions I've already taken with you. I'll see if there is any question you can now do. I've already taken, I'll take next week also. Don't worry about previous year questions. The ones I needed to take, I took. 1 second. You've done this, you've done this, you've done this. Okay, you do this. Previous year questions. Organization of Entrepreneurs, yes. Which one of the following books of ancient India has the love story of a son of a founder of the Shunga dynasty? Did it just 5 minutes before. This is the type of question which comes out of that sector. No, Abhijit, that's... No, that is not what... 71% totally correct. I'll answer what you mean to say. Allowed to. Yeah, 71 totally correct. Malvika Agnimitra talks about Agnimitra of the Shunga dynasty. Straightforward. You Meghdutta is not that. Ratnavali, all are Kalidasan texts, but not important. See, Abhijit, that is not the reason. That is one of the aspects wherein we, within that fold, allow for multiple texts. That is not the reason. That is an aspect. It's not a cause, but a what we call as a impact of that whole process. Okay, getting my point? The questions which I have today, you already answered. The next, for that we need to go to post Gupta. You need to do to answer that questions. Can I consolidate? One question was there which was left basically. 2021, 23. I'll do separately. Can I consolidate? Okay. This is political master timeline. In a way, we've very basically finished ancient India because next week we start early medieval. So, political. Janapadas. Shunga. Indo-Greek. Saka. Kushana Saka. Gupta. What is the inner line? What does the inner line represent? Okay. So, if we talk about political, no state, early state formation, mature state, but we know state, we know, do not know how, what it was. Thereafter, tribal state, territorial, monarchical, thereafter monarchical, you have monarchies and oligarchies, centralized state, semi centralized with decentralizing tendencies, semi centralized with feudalistic tendencies, decentralized state. What is the distinction of the Satavahanas in this? Introduced land grant tradition or decentralization tendencies. Semi-centralized would mean that they're not like Mauryas, but a little bit centralized in the core area. Outside, decentralizing tendencies are there. Basically, this is the only centralized state in that regard. Now, if I want to add further, no tax, no tax, no tax, no tax, no tax. So this I have let megalithic. Oh, 1 second. 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. Megalithic, mature state, Sangam, monarchical, Vakatakas, decentralized. Yes, where was I? No tax. Taxation emerges here, and thereon it goes forward. Taxation emerges, emergence of taxation, and thereafter it goes on till time in memorial. Is this clear? Political, come on. We are revising as we going on. This is basically the summary of past 2 weeks together. Yes, no? Come on. Yes, okay. Hereditary kingship also comes here only. Okay. Now, can I move to economic? Okay. Paleo, Meso, Neo, Indus Valley Civilization, early Vedic, later Vedic, Mahajana Vadas, Mauryas, post Maurya. I am putting into one only because we don't need to keep a distinction. Vakatakas and Guptas. Now, hunting and gathering, hunting and gathering plus domestication of animals, agriculture, Indus Valley plus hunting, gathering plus domestication of animals. This is also agriculture plus hunting plus gathering plus animal husbandry. Pastoralism, agriculture, 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 agriculture. Agro-pastoral agriculture. Anybody has any issue here? Generally, first set of facts. No? No trade. No trade. No trade. Internal and external trade. No trade. No trade. Revival of internal and external trade. Internal and external trade. Highest point of external trade. External trade declines. First currency, punch marked coins. In Neolithic, domestication of animal is not clear. It says do here. This much you use your first proper currency, Indo-Greek coins. Anything else which we can add into economic? No? Okay. Can I move to social? Taxation is here only. Vivek, where are you? Taxation is here. In the political, you just have to not ratify this. Learn this in a more logical way. Everything is logical. It's a gradation. It's the ratification is not the right word. Not the right word. Okay. Everyone else is able to see the orange color. You're not able to see the orange color. That's it. That is the reason. Okay. Complex. So sure it is. Untouchability. I think this is more or less complete in itself. Anything I'm missing? So, simple society, complex with craft specialization, occupational division, complex society for megalithic, 4 for Varna system, social discrimination, women subordinated to men, first rise of first religion, Vedic Brahmanism, Mahajanpada, a period Varna system further crystallization, rise of Buddhism, Jainism, Ajivikism, untouchability comes in modern period, Varna Samskara first process, Varna Samskara second process, revivalism of Brahmanism as Puranic Hinduism. Here, South India, as I said, till megalithic is separate. For Sangam and post Maurya and Gupta, all are the same. So, anybody has any issue here? Neel Kamal, no. Okay. Now, just to give you a chronological sequence, generally, you have Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, Vedic Age, Mahajanapadas, Mauryas, Indo-Greeks, Saka, Kusana, and Shungas, and Guptas. Here you have Sangam, here you have Satavahana and Sangam. Clear? Untouchability was continues till the colonial period into modern India. Our constitution banned. What is the article which bans untouchability? Which bans untouchability? Article 17. Very good. Article 17. Perfect. So untouchability starts in the modern period, keeps on going on. So this is what is called a master timeline. I give these types of master timelines in which basically I will summarize the whole section itself. So in a way, with this, we finish ancient India. We have also, in a way, covered the basic period of ancient India. What I start next week is we will now enter, we will discuss what is called Harsha's period, Pallavas, Chalukyas. They are called post Gupta polities. Now, these questions are coming from this area also. We'll discuss Harsha, Pallava, Chalukya as the main three. Other than that, we will also discuss about the Maitrakas, the Maukharis, the Varmans, which are there. Then, when we'll be done with this on Saturday, we will move to what is called the tripartite struggle. Tripartite struggle would be Pala, Pratihara, Rashtrakutas. This is called early medieval dynasties. I'll discuss why are they called early medieval. And then we'll talk about imperial cholas. Once we are done with this, we will basically be done with the early medieval. And next week, we will enter into first Turkish conquest and establishment of Delhi Sultanate. Once we are done with that, we will do Delhi Sultanate, then Vijaya Nagara and Bahmani. Then we'll go to Mughals after covering Lodhis and Sayyids. Sayyids first, then Lodhis. Mughals, two classes, part 1, part 2. Then we will have Marathas and Sikhs. And the last module of medieval is going to be Sufism and Bhaktism. There are medieval will be also over. Then modern starts, which you are going to cover separately. Weekend batch I am going to take in a later date in November. Tomorrow also I think some modern batch starts, which is not with me. And as soon as we cover this, we will move to art and culture. Art and culture will have 10 modules. And the first module is architecture. Second module is the concept of sculpture, is painting. Third is sculpture. Fourth, after we have multiple topics, which I will discuss how we are going about it. Music, dance, theater, this, that, numismatics, everything will be covered. 10 modules will even cover the current affairs aspect here. Chandalas are within a group of Shudras. Shudras is a bigger term, Chandalas is a smaller group, untouchable group within it. So this is the basic way we are going to go forward. So previous year questions for what you had to do, Shushmita is already done. For the next set of previous year questions to be done, because they are encompassing multiple modules of the early medieval, we have to cover something for Saturday and then take it on Sunday. So whatever was there has already been done, which I showed you yesterday and today. I've sprinkled around rather than taking them once. So very simply, ancient is over. Now, does ancient actually make sense? Are you now more comfortable with ancient India? Do you understand the concept of ancient now? That is the more fundamental question I'm trying to ask you, because that is a more important question. Facts are there, figures are there, 15 minutes you will put in, then automatically you will be able to do it. This is what really matters. If you're able to remember these three slides, then your ancient is done. Facts, figures, you can go over a period of time. Just remember 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5 from time to time. You will automatically cover them. But to have a understanding, so if somebody says in the mains question, for example, in a mains question, if they ask you the contribution of the Kushanas, now you know who are the Kushanas. That is the more important point. There is this is the point. Because art and culture questions actually presume that the ancient part is already done, they will use the word Kushanas, Indo-Greeks, prehistory, a prehistoric, the concept of Indus Valley civilization, Gupta, Maurya. Now, are these words giving a ringing a bell to you where they are in the larger story of what we have been doing? This is the purpose. This is why I do ancient and medieval first and then art and culture. Because now you are not clueless to where is the Shungas, where is the Shakas, who are the Shakas, who are the Satavahanas. So, with this, our adhyay, our story of ancient is over, and I will see you next week with early medieval and medieval. It will take us 1.5 weeks, which is next Saturday, Sunday. I'll tell you also, it will take us second and third, and thereafter second, third, ninth to cover medieval. Then 10th, 16th, 17th, 23rd, 24th. 2.5 weeks is going to be art and culture. Right? On 24th, we finish our course, Ancient Medieval Art and Culture. Done? Okay. If you don't have a question, you can leave the session. Thank you so much for being here with me for the past close to what? 10 hours today, yesterday 8 hours, 20, 25 hours. Thank you. Take care. Have a very productive weekday. I will see you next Saturday with another set of issues. And I hope that you will revise these very simply over the next week. Because when I start tomorrow, or rather when I start on Saturday, I will presume that you know ancient. For anybody who's going to watch this in a recorded session, please, again, my basic request to you is that this is only available for the next 7 days. Over and above that, live is something which I encourage you to do. But if it is not possible, do revise before you come for medieval on Saturday. So for the message for future generations has also been given. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. And just don't worry about medieval also. The same way we covered ancient, medieval is more interesting and less factual than actually ancient. Okay. Right. If you don't have a question, you can leave the session. How to write answers in own words. Everybody writes in their own words only. Arun, fundamental to that is firstly, you have to practice how to write in your own words. Yes, all recorded sessions, be it morning batch, evening batch, or weekend batch, are only available for 7 days. After 7 days, not available. That is for discipline. That is basically for discipline. If you will always think that I have a recording, you will never watch the video itself. That's the basic point. No, there are more terms. No. Medieval India, much lesser terms. Much lesser terms. This is extremely heavy that way. As I said, how to write in own words. See, first learn something. And without the pressure of answer writing, write it down and see how much are you able to understand what you've learned and how are you putting it on paper. There can be three things which you could actually see. First, either you are doing grammatical mistakes, or when do I take Modern India? Modern India, the weekend batch of Modern India is with me as of right now. I think November. So you are either doing grammatical mistakes, either you're taking too much time, or you are actually not able to put it down on paper itself. Grammatical mistakes can only be solved by reading NCRTs and books to understand how grammar works. Second is you're not able to do it in time. That is not your problem. The more you will write, the quicker you will become. And third is you're not able to write what is asked by the question. Therein you need to learn better, for which you need to revise. 8 out of 15 is actually quite good. 9 out of 15 is again actually quite good. If you're getting above 6 in any of these what we call papers, more than enough. If you write every day, you will become better. Sangam Polities, Chola Chera Pandya, Ranjanijalian, Karikal Chola, and Sengovatan. That's it. Any other question? Okay. Political, economic, social. You want to see social? See. Okay. So I'll see you next Saturday. See you. Bye-bye. How to write conclusion in factual question. If it's a factual question, still it would have some impact or significance. So either reiterate the question itself or write the significance and impact of that thing. Okay. Hardeep, I hope I've answered you. Okay. See you. Take care. Bye-bye. See you next Saturday.